Welcome to Fictional Narrative. I'm Mary, and it is Cozy Saturday. Cozy Saturday is a series where I review a cozy mystery that I've newly delved into. I give you a non-spoilery review, followed by a rating and a spoilery review, and basically tell you whether or not it's a series that I am interested in continuing. And this week we're talking about Death by Bubble Tea by Jennifer J. Chow, and it is the first in the LA Night Market series. This series is about a woman named Yale Yi, who is visited by her cousin and now has to spend time with her cousin, who she doesn't quite always get along with. There's a little bit of a jealousy aspect there, but also her father has finally agreed to allow her to open a stand for their restaurant in the LA night market. And so she gets to run it with her cousin, something that she's ultimately not looking forward to, but it was her idea to kind of do this food stand in the first place. So she's at least got one aspect that she's excited about. Until Yale and her cousin Celine become suspects in a murder or accidental death that may or may not be caused by the drinks that they served that night at their food stand. So I want to start with some positives about this book, which is that although it is set in LA, it is written in a concise manner where the reader doesn't get confused, doesn't need to have a huge map of LA in their mind or anything like that, but it's very much contained even within a bigger city, whereas other cozy mysteries are set in a small town. And it's based in a certain community, so it really helps to kind of tighten the overall circle of area we are talking about. And then on top of which, there's a lot of discussions of family bonds, family healing, which are done very well in my opinion, as well as trauma healing. It's done very well. It takes the time to illustrate that these things take time. And sometimes you need to hear that someone is there for you. And I think this book kind of gives us that, and it gives us that cozy feeling, as well as just the setup and characters in general. For example, you kind of learn right off the bat, Yale and her cousin Celine are totally opposites. And while Yale is definitely more thoughtful, Celine kind of just expects things to fall into line, and they do for her in almost kind of like I manifested it type of way. But deep down, she's very caring and understanding. And because we're following Yale's narration, Yale's point of view the entire time, she's slowly finding that about her cousin and getting to know her cousin as an adult. And her cousin is getting to know her. And it is kind of just a very, very sweet adventure between the two of them. Which brings me to, of course, the character development, which is done extremely well. And not only in our main characters, but character developments in the characters that we're introduced to, the setup that we're introduced to, our list of potential suspects that we're introduced to. Everything is done in a very concise manner, and the red herrings are, they're just like a bunch of little crumbs sprinkled everywhere. That's the only way that I can explain it, because it's like it's one of those mysteries where it really could be anybody. Some things I didn't like about the book were the detective. At this point in this first book, I would not say we were introduced to a love interest, which I only say because that is often the case with a lot of cozy mysteries. Is there's usually like a love interest or someone you might think is kind of a love interest in the first book. Right now, it's nothing like that. It's very much kind of a slow build and really based in dealing with the family. And so I'm just going to say that right off the bat. The detective is not any kind of love interest that I can see right now, but he could just be a better detective, I guess. That is my biggest gripe with him so far. There are some times when the pacing of the book slows a little bit, especially towards the middle and when we hit our big reveal of who the villain is in this book. I think it's meant to put you in a more, like, I guess in the character's mindset, a more adrenaline pushing situation. But it just kind of took the wind out of my sails, and it brought it back later on, but that's just kind of where the book dropped the ball a little bit towards the middle, and I guess the reveal. So overall, I definitely would continue to read this series. I think there's only one more book at the time of me reviewing this, so at least I'll be able to catch up quick. This is also the same author as Mimi Gets a Clue, so maybe I'll pick up that one as well. Not sure yet, but I do enjoy this author. So yeah, I rated this one a 5 out of 5. I loved it, and now we're gonna move into the spoilery section. And again, starting with the positives. I really like that we are introduced to the community of restaurants that are participating within the night market. There's an instance where there is a meeting about this ongoing police investigation. And so we're introduced to people, but also that's a pool of suspects also for our characters. And the author doesn't try to justify anything. For example, the characters that Yale has like history with and like, oh, this person's a pain in the butt, they continue to be that. Even at the end of the story, even when you think, oh, maybe this person will let up and stop being a jerk, this author is just like, no, that's who these people are. This one's a jerk. This one's a flirt that may be a cause of some fatal attraction storyline or something like that. Ultimately, ultimately, there are no apologies. The characters are who they are. I like that. I like that it gives the reader something to work with, in which in the future, I'm not expecting to have an easy turnaround of, oh, it was just a misunderstanding or something like that. And everything is all good. It's not always going to be all good. You're going to have people who are kind of your adversaries or your frenemies, and that's okay. That adds more to that dynamic. And I think it's healthy to have something like that. And I might criticize, like I've um, I think I've reviewed some things in the past, specifically on Instagram, where I found a story to be needlessly misogynistic in terms of who is this character's nemesis. But that's because I also found it to be outlandish in the way that it's described. In terms of this particular book, everything, the reasoning behind why characters act the way that they do is really well done. The reasons are believable, their motivations are believable, and so as a reader, I'm just kind of like, okay, where is this going to go next? Because I want to know, which is always a really good thing to go about. I also want to talk a little bit about Yale's background, which is that she had recently gone through something very traumatic, and so she has changed her life completely. You learn in the very beginning that she doesn't really do electronics or anything like that. She still has a landline. It's to the point where the detective is like, I saw you come into the lobby of your building. Why did you wait so long to call the cops? And Celine's like, yeah, Yale doesn't have like a cell phone. And the detective is flustered by this. And totally understandable. But I like that there's no expectation for Yale to completely change her ways when the changes that she's gone through is a trauma response. Now, Celine, on the other hand, she really loves like marketing through social media and things like that. So she's very tech savvy, but she never ever judges Yale really about why she lives the way that she does. And it's because within the family they already know the tragedy that happened. The way that Celine is presented in the book, like everything kind of slides off her. She's not bothered by many things. Things will fall into place for her, and she's kind of an airhead even when she specifically is a suspect for a murder. She just so believes her own innocence that she's like, yeah, I mean, he can investigate. Like, why should that bother me? Like, in regards to the detective. Meanwhile, Yale is like super worried about it, but she never judges Yale for any reason. Even when she's like, oh, yeah, you should consider getting a cell phone or something like that. Yale is like, well, what can I do on it? And they're messing around with the notes app so Yale can make some notes. And Celine's just like, oh, yeah, play with this. These are the kinds of things that you can do with it. However, Celine is portrayed that almost seems like she's not caring is so untrue and brings such nuance to her character that I love. Yale has a lot of nuance to her character too, but even more than that, she has a lot of healing to do. And she has always looked at Celine as someone she had wanted to be close to when she was a child, but never found that opportunity. And now the opportunity has fallen into both of their laps, and it is the cutest built up in the story. I think it's a relationship that makes me feel the coziest feeling, like the feeling that your family is always going to be there for you, even through little misunderstandings, but then also that you can communicate with them, you can understand, you can take the time. It's always really sweet to see, and I really enjoyed it. But now let's talk about some negatives. First of all, let's talk about that detective, okay? When I say that detective could be smarter, I mean it. What do you mean you're telling the next of kin that you are new to this type of detective work, that you are new to solving murders of this nature? You want to inspire confidence, not the opposite, right? Because that's what happens. And of course, the next of kin, the murder victim's sister, is like, well, then I got to figure it out myself because this detective is probably no better than I am at this point as a novice. So she does her sleuthing, and she is really good. She's a really good character, very headstrong. But because of the way that everything is set up, even she is a suspect for me at one point. And I think that was pretty good in terms of a mystery setup. You have huge groups of people that could be the suspect, and you're dwindling and you're dwindling. And the minute you think you have your eye on someone, that person's not it. But speaking of our main villain, I know, I know, villains do the monologuing thing. I know that sometimes when done well, it can be enjoyable. But I also know that when I see that it's not necessary for a character to do it, I don't expect them to do it. You can explain it later, you can have the detective explain it. In this case, I felt like the villain was too smart to stand there and be distracted by Yale goading them on to, like, tell what the evil plan was. Like, what was that? It just didn't seem in character for this character, especially because this is not a talkative character. So, and it didn't make any sense. It didn't seem necessary. Also, Celine, at one point, she's from Hong Kong, so she leaves for Hong Kong, and then she comes back like immediately, and then appears, to save Yale, kind of, or to just be there for her, right then and there when she's in trouble. And I'm like, that doesn't seem realistic either. And also, the detective came after her, so how did that happen? Yeah, so I just thought that was a bit weird. Um, I feel like I'm gonna read the second book and then I'm still gonna laugh at this detective, but he kind of just he appears to want to do the stereotypical, I have the answers. I am the smart one in this situation. Kind of very pseudo intellectual in a way. And for all the times that he could have just listened to Yale and Celine and kind of been put on the right track, he rebuffs them so much for almost no reason. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. My library was just like, hey, so we know you had this hold for this audiobook and you're good to check it out now. So I stopped all of my reading plans for this book. So I want to talk about it. It was so good. I love when, the week before I'm talking about one that's not so cozy. And then today I'm like, I like this book. It's very cozy to me. I think it'll feel cozy to you. I 100% recommend it. Like, I'm happy to put the positivity out there. So if you watched this far, thank you so much. And if you want to see more of these kinds of reviews, go ahead and subscribe, like, comment, and I'll see you next time. Bye.